Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very, very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Missy Tarantino. She is here to celebrate her traveling trunk series, and the latest in that series is called Carla's Adventure in Kenya. Before we invite Missy into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the books by Morenike Onyenusi, Isaiah and the Orchestra of Sounds, and Chasing Butterflies in the Sunlight. Two fantastic books that your kids will love. Isaiah and the Orchestra of Sounds is all about a young man named Isaiah loving his life in Baltimore when suddenly he acquires an alien resident orchestra in his right ear. The book talks about Isaiah's struggle with tinnitus and also offers some great information on the prevention of tinnitus and support for those living with tinnitus. We also want to let you know about Chasing Butterflies in the Sunlight, a riveting, vividly descriptive, beautifully illustrated, and humorous book of stories for kids and adults. It describes the joys and innocence of a childhood experienced by privileged Nigerian-American Ronke when she was growing up in a lovely, culturally and racially diverse world on a university campus in Nigeria in the 1970s. You're going to love these books. They're available on Amazon. Join us right now from the great state of Colorado. Our guest is here today to celebrate how beautiful our world is and how lucky we are that we get to travel. Oh, well, when the pandemic's over, we'll get to travel around this beautiful world of ours. Please welcome to the show the author of Carla's Adventure, Kenya, Missy Tarantino. Hey, Missy, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. Thanks for having me on the show.
My Boston accent made a very unexpected appearance when I was saying the word adventure. I apologize to everybody who didn't understand that word the way I pronounced it. Tell us all about this book, please.
Sure. Carla's Adventure in Kenya is book 6 in my Traveling Trunk series. Carla's a young girl who her grandmother used to work for an airline, and she acquired this magical traveling trunk that is full of objects from different countries that she's been to. And every time that Carla finds something in the trunk and asks, where did this come from? She ends up there and she learns all about the culture. Usually there's a festival involved and she meets a new friend who takes her around and teaches her about the food, the clothing, the transportation, climate, anything and everything you can think of that goes along with that culture. So in Carla's Adventure in Kenya, her grandmother actually goes with her and they go and visit a tribe in northern Kenya called the Samburu tribe. And she learns all about their fascinating culture.
Wow. Well, you know, Boston has this strong connection with not necessarily the nation of Kenya, but with Kenyans. And
Really?
that our Boston Marathon in the last 30, 40 years has been won by amazing athletes from Kenya so many times. And it is great to see them, especially in the spring, to see them training here in Boston. So, yeah, my eyes lit up when I knew we were going to be talking a little bit about this nation that I've met so many people from, but I haven't been to myself. You were mentioning that Carla reaches into this trunk and pulls out an object that takes her to that far-off land. What object did she pull out that brought her to Kenya?
So it's a necklace that is very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the very symbolic of the Samburu tribe. The women there actually make these necklaces that are made with little beads in red, yellow, green, black, white, and they're very circular and long, and they go clear out to their shoulders, and these women wear a lot of them, and when they dance, the necklaces kind of bounce up and down and everything. And so one of the ladies of the Samburu tribe had given one of these to her grandmother when she had been there a long time ago. And so that takes her back there, and she reconnects with one of the women.
Oh, super, super. This is really fun. What was the inspiration for the Traveling Trunk series?
So I work in a school in Colorado with kids who come from all over the United States. I'm a CLD teacher, which stands for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse. And so I wanted a way to celebrate where these children are coming from so that the people in our school could celebrate where they're from as well, and they can see their culture portrayed in a very positive light. And so my first thought was about walking in somebody else's shoes. So at first I was going to just do shoes. And when she steps into these shoes and takes a few steps, she ends up going where they were. And then I got to thinking, why limit it to shoes? And then I went from there to where would you keep those shoes? And so that's where the traveling trunk came in. Wow. And so in different stories, there's a belt in one of them. There's a bracelet. There's a hat. Different objects that she can put on or carry with her will take her to these places.
Such a neat idea. And I definitely want to delve more into the books, but two things. First off, when I think of Colorado, and I've never been, so excuse my ignorance, but when I think of Colorado, I don't necessarily think of this incredibly diverse population. So it sounds like I'm lacking. I'm very ignorant in that way. But I really love your title. I really love that you have this thing in Colorado, the culturally and linguistically diverse. Mm-hmm. I've worked in schools all throughout the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, and I meet lots of, English language learners and English as a second language, and there used to be bilingual education, and that focused on the language without helping people understand that in addition to the fact that we're speaking a different language, these kids come from a really different culture, and that's probably a bigger deal than the fact that they're speaking a different language.
Right, it is. And you think about these kiddos that come into the United States, and there's so much beyond the language, like you just said, that they don't even understand. We've even had children who come to us from migrant camps, not migrant camps, but they come from like refugee camps, mm-hmm. and they don't even understand what a flushing toilet is about. So we have to even show them those kinds of things that we take for granted here in the United States that they have never had access to really come into play a lot of times. Just even like crossing the street or knowing what the signals are, those kinds of things, they have no clue. So it's really starting at square one with a cultural standpoint. And even some of the foods that we have in our schools that they may have never ever seen before, and they're not even sure if it's safe for them to eat, mm-hmm. And sometimes their systems don't even react positively to it, as they kind of have to ease into it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure for religious reasons, there may be food that is served typically to everybody that they're culturally, religiously are not allowed or not supposed to eat.
That's correct. And we do have a lot of conversations with our kitchen staff around that and making sure that there are options for those children who are not allowed to eat certain things. Yeah. And even we have some that at certain times of the year that they're not even allowed to eat at all, mm-hmm. During the daytime. And so we will sometimes have to bring them, when their class goes to lunch, we bring them to a separate room so that they don't have to necessarily be around that if they don't want to be. Mm-hmm. We leave it up to the children to say, is this something that you want us to do for you?
Right.
So
now I get the importance of you as a teacher teaching these kids that are new to the country. It's really important for you to understand that they come from different cultures and to help them acclimate to our culture and learn the different oddities of this culture and how things work here. But also, I'm hoping that there's a way that you can also help the kids who've been here forever understand and appreciate the fact, hey, your new classmates have a different culture. They've done things differently, and different doesn't mean wrong. In fact, you might like the way they do some things.
Correct. And that's where these Carla's books come in. Because I don't just write these books by myself. I bring those children in and they help me. A lot of times the books focus on their favorite festival or something from their own culture. In fact, I'm working on another book in the Carla's Adventure series. I have a 5th grader from Vietnam, and his favorite holiday is Tet, which is coming up February 1st. And so he's been so excited to sit down with me and explain to me how it works and what it's about and what kinds of foods are served. And so then I give him a copy of that book to take back home to his family too. And a lot of the teachers have these in their classrooms, and they share these with the students. And so they do get to celebrate their cultures that way too.
Yeah. You know, the United States has always been portrayed, at least when I was growing up, as this melting pot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we've ever become a melting pot. Melting pot, you throw everything in, it melts, and it all becomes this new thing. We're more like a stew, where everything, you get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, or more like a 7-course meal. And I think that's better than a melting pot, because, when everything gets melted together and it becomes this new thing, well, that's different. But there's so many wonderful celebrations and customs and ideas and knowledge that come from different cultures that why would we want them to disappear and transform into this glob when we can just celebrate together?
I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's something that I do on a daily basis, is encourage these kiddos to not lose where they come from. I want them to retain that because it makes them unique and special. And I want them to see how speaking multiple languages, we have some kiddos who speak 4 or 5 languages in our school. Don't lose that piece of you. Don't try to become like everybody else. I want you to be you. And that makes my heart happy when they want to bring that in and share that with their classmates too. I had a student in kindergarten when we were reading the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and I asked if her mom would read it in her native language. And Mom wasn't able to come in, but she sent in a recording of her, and the look on her daughter's face hearing her mom read this story in their native language was just priceless.
That's awesome. So you're encouraging me to keep my Boston accent and to not hide it. Well, people don't understand me when I use it. But anyway, okay, I'll work on that. Hey,
that's on them.
Hey, again, I showed my ignorance earlier. Like I said, I never thought of Colorado as being, this place with a lot of diversity. Educate me, please. Tell me a little bit about Colorado and where we can find this great rainbow of people.
Well, they're all over the place. I live in the northern part of Colorado, northeastern, in Greeley is where I teach. And the school that I work at, there are students who we have probably, besides English, we have over 10 languages spoken in our building, all ranging from, obviously we've got a lot of kids who speak Spanish in our area. That's our main one, but we also have students who speak Karen and Vietnamese, and I have some languages I'd never even heard of that are like native languages from the hills of Guatemala. They're not Spanish speakers. They have an Indian language that is an ancient language there. I had a student whose family spoke Mayan a couple of years ago. I have a student who speaks Chuquis, which is from like Guam area. So we have students who come to us from all over the United States who have been brought into the United States from all over the world as immigrants. And also, they're coming from these camps where they were being persecuted in their country. And so they've been allowed into the United States. A lot of them end up in the Denver area, but they kind of spread out all over the eastern part of Colorado more than the western part, I think, but all up and down the Front Range, we've got languages from all over the world.
Wow. Now, is this some? I usually ask authors, and I'll ask you later on, did you always dream of being a children's author? I'm curious, did you always dream about being a culturally and linguistically diverse teacher?
I was a classroom teacher for 25 years, Jed, and I taught everything from first grade all the way through fifth grade. And it didn't occur to me for a long time to go after this particular job. I've always had students in my classrooms who spoke multiple languages, and students who came to me who had no English. And so I've kind of been immersed in it my entire career. And then when I moved to the school that I'm at right now, I had an opportunity to get that endorsement onto my license. And then when this position opened up, I went, hey, I've got that endorsement. Why don't I go do that? And so that's what brought me to where I'm at.
That's wonderful. I'm imagining that there's somebody out there thinking, how in the world does Missy teach a group of kids that they come here and one kid they don't speak English, one kid is speaking Spanish, one kid's speaking Vietnamese, one kid's speaking Mayan, and we didn't even know people are speaking Mayan right now. How do you teach? Where do you start?
Well, the first question a lot of people ask is, well, do you speak all those languages? And the answer is no. I have a little bit of Spanish, and I'm always encouraging the kids to teach me more. And I love to show them that I'm trying to learn their language like they're trying to learn mine. But to get back to your question, I use a lot of pictures. I use a lot of, we call it realia, where I bring in the actual objects. When we have students who have zero English, that's one of the ways that we do a two-way communication is with these cards, where it's real basic things like pencil and bathroom and food and different things like that. We keep those on a ring so that they can communicate with their teacher about their needs. We plaster the classrooms with signage that label things in the classroom in their native language as well as in English. And a lot of times it'll have a picture on that as well so that they can start learning that. And it also gives the kids in the classroom the opportunity to start learning that as well. My student from Vietnam this year, when he walked in the room and he saw that, he was so excited. Like, you put my language in this room. It made me have goosebumps on my arms. We do a breakfast group in the mornings where we do what we call survival English, where we start teaching them phrases and how to ask questions in English, like, may I go to the bathroom, or those kinds of things, just that survival. How do I get through the day? What do you call this thing? It's called a backpack. It's a book, and have them do a lot of repetition. We do a lot of repeating, like, I'll say, this is a pencil, and I'll have them repeat it, and they'll each take turns so then they can hear it correctly. We also try, if we can, to pair them up with a student who is fluent in their language, can speak English as well. That works really nicely when you've got multiple students who speak that language, but when you only have the one, it makes it even more challenging. So we just, I use an app on my phone. There's several different free apps that you can put on your phone where you can speak into it and it'll translate it. They're not always perfect, but it gets us through. And kids learn languages so much faster than adults do. I'm just always floored at how quickly they pick it up.
Yeah. So typically, what is it? A year, 2 years until a kid
to become fluent in English? And academically, we're talking academically, it takes like 7.
Okay.
So to get to where you can communicate and have social English, a year, maybe 2 years, but to be in school is a whole different challenge for them, because it's a lot more formal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Than it is when you're just talking with your friends about what you're doing for the weekend. You have to be able to read textbooks and things like that. Makes it really challenging because we have to address all of that: the listening, the speaking, the reading, and the writing. Those are what we call the 4 domains of language.
Yeah. I look back, and over my career, I've had a chance to perform all over the United States and in Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico, I performed in Spanish, and I memorized. I rewrote my show using the 300 or 400 Spanish words that I knew. And if I needed another one, I just learned one. And so my show was wasn't in perfect Spanish by any means, but people would just assume when I got off stage that I was fluent, and these educators that would invite me into their school would want to sit down and have a very formal education-based talk with me afterwards, and I'm like, it ain't gonna happen. Sorry.
Yep, I do. Same thing happens to me with the kids, because I will ask them, how are you doing? And I'll say it in Spanish, and then I get this torrent of language, and it's like, sorry.
But, I learned a big lesson in performing in Puerto Rico, in performing in a different language, is that I learned that it was okay for me to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I learned that it was okay for me to go on stage and take a chance and mispronounce, because I did it every day, mispronounce words, and sometimes mispronounce, and the word I said was a bad word.
Oh, no.
But it was always kind of like, it's the gringo who doesn't know what he's doing. But he's trying, and that's okay.
But he's trying.
And I think if more of us could just become comfortable being vulnerable, mm-hmm. that a lot of the fear that we have when we meet somebody that's different would be taken away. Because I think I'm a firm believer that a lot of the all prejudice that exists in the world is based on fear. It's this idea that this person is going to come and they're going to take something that I don't have. I'm not going to be able to communicate with them. There's going to be distrust and whatnot. And if you let go of that and just say, you know what, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a little bit tough. But, man, if Missy can sit down and teach a group of kids who are speaking 10 different languages, one of them being an ancient language we didn't know that was being spoken anymore, I can sit down and learn how to get along with this person who just moved in next to me.
Very, very true. And, Jed, this is kind of, I know you're going to get to this in a little bit, but I'll jump to it right now, is how I got into writing these books, is exactly what you're talking about. I had read a book called the Happiness Project. And in there, this lady, talked about doing something every month to improve herself, because she was trying to become more happy. And one of the things she had done was, jump into what's called NaNoWriMo. And I'd never heard of that, which is National Novel Writing Month, where you take a month out of the year and you write a 50,000 word novel in 30 days. And I went, I'd like to try that. And so I did, and it was an adult book, but then I thought I wanted to start writing these children's books. But what my point being is that for the longest time, I have always every year chosen something to do that is out of my comfort zone, because I never want to forget what it feels like for my students when they walk into that school that first day. And they don't know anybody. They don't know a single word in English. And that fear that they have, but they're taking that risk, like you're saying, and trying this. I never want to forget what that feels like. So every year I challenge myself to do something that's out of my comfort zone. So writing that first book was, for me, one of those things that I did. And I think that it really helps me to have more compassion and empathy for them.
Yeah, so important. So in book 6, we travel to Kenya. Mm-hmm. There are 5 books before that. What nations are we going to visit in the other books?
First book, she went to Guatemala, and I chose that one for a couple of reasons, because my sister has a son who was born in Guatemala, so I thought I'd love to start there and honor him. And from there, she travels to Thailand for a celebration called Loy Krathong. It's all about letting go of things that make you worry. From there, she goes to Sweden and celebrates the Midsummer Festival. Then I decided I have a lot of students from Mexico, so I'm trying to go all around the world, and I'm not just trying to stay in one area. So then I decided to go to Mexico, and a lot of people have a misconception about Cinco de Mayo and the Independence Day being the same thing, and they're not. So she goes to Mexico and celebrates Dia de la Independencia. Book 5 takes her to South Korea for Children's Day. Then those are the 5 books that come before the book in Kenya. I'm working on one in Ireland right now about St. Patrick's Day. And then from there, she's going to go to Vietnam.
Yeah, Cinco de Mayo. That's just a day to buy Corona.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm excited. I'm really excited that you're going to do St. Patrick's Day, because I think most people here in the United States go, oh, St. Patrick's Day, day to get drunk and act like a jerk. And it's a very different experience in Ireland.
Very different experience in Ireland. And I decided I'd center it around Blarney Castle and the city of Cork and that area of Ireland, rather than go to Dublin, which is, way more well known. I thought, I'm going to go south, and we're going to go to a region that maybe is not quite as well known.
Well, that's my grandfather was born in Cork.
You're kidding. That is so interesting.
I'm not. I absolutely know nothing about Cork, because when he came here, he said, I came here to be American, not Irish American. And I said, okay.
Wow. Yeah. I love researching these and learning about these cultures. It's fascinating. People, that's another question I get is, have you been to all these places? And nope. It's on my bucket list, but I haven't been there yet.
Now, this is a silly question, because I know that there aren't kids. I don't think there are any kids who just speak Irish or Gaelic. So I imagine you've never had a kid in your classroom that was just a Gaelic speaker.
No, I haven't.
No, I don't think you will. I think they're all bilingual over there. I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Carla's adventure in Kenya and the whole Traveling Trunk series.
They can go to my website, MissyTarantino.com. They're all available there, and you can learn all about them.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking with the author of Carla's Adventure in Kenya. It's an early chapter book for 3rd, 4th graders, and our guest has been the author, Missy Tarantino. Hey, Missy, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Ariel Skinner. She'll be here to celebrate I'm a Sunflower. The sunflower is me. A really fascinating conversation with a former foster child who is now serving kids as a social worker. Hey, I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Missy Tarantino. Please be sure to check out Carla's Adventure in Kenya. Also want to thank our sponsor, the books by Monica Onyenusi, Isaiah and the Orchestra of Sound, and Chasing Butterflies in the Sunlight. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.